Hello, this is Dan with Orbital Guitars, and welcome to part 2 of my GGBO2022 build. I've got this really nice slab of Walnut Burl, but at the moment its surfaces are a little uneven, so I'll need to do something about that. First I'll use my planer to flatten the top and bottom surfaces. I'm sure somebody's going to yell at me in the comments for this and say that, well, you're supposed to use a jointer for the first face and then a planer for the other one. And while that is technically correct,
the best kind of correct,
the problem is that my jointer is not big enough for that, and a big floor-mounted jointer is not in the budget. Once I'm done with the planer, I use my table saw to square up the longest edge. After that, it's on to the bandsaw, where I will resaw the slab into 2 pieces with half the thickness. And if you thought resawing it once was stressful enough, just think how much more stressful it is to do it 3 times in order to end up with a pair of book-matched carve tops. That said, the end result is stunning. So, once I select which top is going to be used for this build, I then need to glue it up. While the glue dries, I'll do some work on the rest of the body. For this guitar, that will be made with Black Limba. The first thing I'll do is drill a pilot hole where the toggle switch is going to go, then enlarge that hole on the top side so that I can use it as a starting point to route the wiring channel through the body. Then I go over to my bandsaw and rough cut the shape of the body. And then it's time to glue the two together. I use a single screw to ensure that the pieces can't slide around too much while I'm applying the clamps. The screw goes in where the neck pocket will be routed out later, so there won't be any sign of it once the guitar is done. After the glue dries, I use my design template and router table to get the body to its final shape, then move over to the spindle sander and clean up the sides a bit. What I'll do next is create the neck pocket. I took some time off camera to lay out the position of the neck pockets so that it will be perfectly aligned with the center line of the body before going to my drill press to remove most of the material, after which I use a router to finalize the neck pocket. Now, because the neck pocket itself has rounded corners, I need to either round over the corners of the neck heel or square the corners of the neck pocket. I find it easier to round the neck heel, so that's what I do here. And then I do a test fit. With the neck fitting nice and snug, I can now confidently lay out the locations for the pickup cavities and the position of the bridge, so it's back to the drill press to hog out the pickup cavities and the control cavity before bringing out the router again to finish them. I'll take some time now to make the back plates, one for the main control cavity and one for the toggle switch. Rough cut them on the bandsaw from offcuts of the body, then refine them on the spindle sander. A few small touches here, using a chamfer bit on the bottom curve of the body for a hard bevel where I won't be carving later, then using my Dremel to create some access for moving the back plates. I also go back to my drill press with my rounded over paddle bit to recess the control knobs and toggle switch. And then it's time to carve, both the comfort carve on the back and all the decorative carves on the front. I start with my angle grinder and carving disc to do the heavy carving, then follow it up with rasps to refine those carves, and finish it with a random orbital sander. I'll then use a cobbled together sanding bit and a hand drill to sand the knob and toggle recesses. So, now we get to the unique yet tedious part of this build, which is filling in all of the voids in the burl with bits of crushed opal. And it took me over 5 hours to do this part, carefully picking out pieces of opal that were just the right size and shape to match every single void. In some cases using a hammer to persuade the pieces to fit, then using super glue to lock them into place. I also tried to create a sort of burst effect by putting these darker green pieces in the center and then brighter blue pieces around the outside, but once the finish went on it became hard to actually see the color difference. And now I'll just sort of let the work speak for itself a bit. Once all the voids were filled, it was time to break out the orbital sander again to sand away all of the excess superglue and bits of opal that were sticking out from the surface of the body. It would have been very uncomfortable to play the guitar if it still had pokey stones sticking out of it. Also, it ended up with this smiley face in it, so to that one guy who threw a fit at me a few years ago about a face and some wood grain that I didn't keep, you're welcome. What I'm doing here is applying some wood hardener to the Black Limba part of the body. I'm doing that because Limba is a fairly soft wood that dents very easily, so by applying this wood hardener, which soaks into the wood like an extremely thin superglue, I'm hoping to prevent it denting as easily as it otherwise would have. And now for something completely different, shaping the headstock. I spent a lot of time designing and redesigning headstocks, and it took up until about this far into the build for me to finally come up with one that I was satisfied with, so that's what I'm doing now, before the neck is glued into the body. And because I always insist on the headstock of every guitar I make matching the body, that means I need to take an offcut from the Walnut Burl, cut it down to a thin veneer, sand it flat, and cut it to shape. Of course, before I can glue it on, I need to cut an opening for the truss rod cover. I'll do this by hand with a jeweler's saw. Now, initially I wanted to save the part that I cut out here to be the truss rod cover so that it would match with the headstock veneer, but because of the voids in the wood, it unfortunately broke apart and couldn't be saved. So instead I used a leftover piece of the fretboard as the truss rod cover. With that done, I can glue on the headstock veneer. And of course, once that glue is dry, I can remove the excess. I'm at what I said earlier about the headstock matching the body, which means that I need to fill all of these voids with opal too. And then it's finally time to glue in the neck. And this brings us to the end of part 2 of my GGBO2022 build. Social media links are in the description, as well as my business email and a link to my reverb shop where you can find any of my guitars that are currently up for sale, and some guitar body design routing templates for those who may be interested in building their own versions of my designs. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next installment.